Hello, everybody, and welcome to another StuKet Expert Session. Today, we have the privilege of hearing from Joseph Clarkson. Joe has been with Taylor for 8 years, working across the agency's DIAGEO business, supporting brands such as Crown Royal, Captain Morgan, Bulleit, and George Dickel. With a primary focus on driving earned media coverage, Joe has contributed to Taylor plus DIAGEO's influencer marketing, corporate communications, event planning, and experiential and digital strategy efforts. We are so excited to hear from you today, Joe. Take it away.
Whoever stumbles upon this presentation, I appreciate you kind of tuning in, and I hope that the upcoming slides can be helpful to you. So just a quick background on myself. I don't want to go too long, but I graduated way too many years ago, and I've been working at a PR agency for the last 8 years or so. And I think a lot of times whenever you're in school, people will say, oh, I didn't really learn anything, or whenever I was in class, nothing I got was valuable. And I'm not here to say that that isn't true. I certainly think that there are some elements within your studies that might not necessarily apply to your professional career, but I do think that this lesson is relevant. It's relevant to me, and I'm gearing up to kind of be a seasoned agency vet. I definitely think it's important whenever you're taking a campaigns class. And I think that it's really important in all facets of PR, whether you go into an agency or whether you do nonprofit stuff, whether you're working in-house. I think really understanding how to put together a clear, organized, and thoughtful PR plan is important. And I wish I would have probably spent some more time whenever I was in school to really kind of digest this. So yeah, I'm sure you guys can scroll through and really read the definitions of all of the elements. But what I'd really like to do today is provide you with some insights from my perspective versus lecturing you as to what these 8 elements are. And hopefully that this will be helpful whenever you guys are pulling together your plans for the duration of your academic career, and definitely as you head into the professional realm. So I don't want this to be a lecture. I don't want this to be boring, but I do think that it's important and certainly relevant to you. So the 8 elements of a PR plan. A quick story for you. My college professor, one of our questions on an intro to PR test was, name the 8 elements of a PR plan, and if you didn't get them exactly in order, you missed all 8 points. I think I switched 4 and 5, and so I lost 8 points, and I was so salty with her about it. I still continue to remind her about it. But in retrospect, it is really important, because I think not only understanding each 8 elements, but understanding when you need to activate those is really important as well. I think I participated in a competition. Some of you might be familiar with it, involving PRSSA, called the Bateman competition. And whenever we were pulling together our PR plan at the end, we kind of did certain elements at the wrong time, and we were trying to back into results or back into strategies, even though we had already activated, and it's really just not an efficient way of working, and I don't think that it helps generate really strong results. So anyway, breaking them down, and you guys probably know this now, but the 8 elements are situations, goals and objectives, audience analysis, strategies, tactics, timeline, budget, and measurement. So let's dive into the first one, shall we? So the situation, I think the situation is obviously really important. And the way I break the situation down is that there's really 3 parts. I think that the 3 parts are the assignment, the situation analysis, and the problems and opportunities, those core problems and opportunities. And I kind of consider those 3 elements all under this situation bucket. So for me, I think whenever you're pulling together a plan, it's really important to clearly outline what the assignment is to your client, whether it's whether it's a client or whether it's your professor, whatever that is, you need to demonstrate to them immediately that you understand what they're asking for. What's so wild, and even throughout my career, I've been in presentations where it's very clear that the client and those who are presenting a plan are on completely different pages. And it really just kind of totally kind of ruins the rest of the plan, right? So I think it's really important to clearly outline that you understand what you're delivering on it and what the ask of this PR plan is. The second piece, the situation analysis, I think it's really important to lay the groundwork about kind of where everything lies. I think within the situation analysis, you can outline business challenges or opportunities, maybe industry trends. And honestly, a lot of this is kind of regurgitating things that you've gotten from a client brief or an assignment brief. So in a lot of ways, you're really kind of stroking the egos of your clients or teachers that you paid attention to the brief that they pulled together. So a lot of it is BS. It shouldn't be very long. Sometimes people will have situation analysis that are slides and slides and slides, and you're just eating up time. So be mindful of that, but I do think that's important. And I think the last piece that I'll touch on for the situation analysis, it could be really helpful to sprinkle in an industry trend or a cultural trend or two that might be new to them, that might not have been included in the brief. I think it just goes to show that you've gone above and beyond. And then I think the last piece under this situation umbrella is nailing down the core challenge and the opportunity that your PR plan looks to solve. And I think that should always kind of ladder back throughout your plan. Your entire plan should solve for that. And I think it should kind of be your kind of North Star throughout. So moving on into goals and objectives. So I think particularly when you're young in your academic career, a lot of people screw these two things up. And I think it's very easy, but they're very, very different. A goal is an overall statement indicating the desired result of your campaign or PR plan, right? Whereas objectives really kind of break that down a little bit, where you're outlining quantifiable metrics that a plan can achieve throughout the campaign. I think objectives really need to be clear, measurable, feasible, timely, and ladder back to some of those business goals that you probably outlined in your situation. I think a goal could be, I want to raise awareness for X charity. Okay, great. An objective to that goal could be, I want to increase donations for our quarterly fundraiser by 25%. So you can see that the raising awareness and helping the overall scope of the charity is your overall goal, but your objective really nails down what your goals are. And it's clear that you want to increase fundraising by X%. So I think when objectives, I think it's really, really important to have that measurable piece. That's really key. I think it's also very important for objectives just to kind of nail down this a little bit more, because I think it's something that students particularly get tripped up on. You need to be very clear about what you're measuring. So whether it's results or a percentage increase on anything, or even business success, that really needs to be outlined within the objectives. And fortunately, and we'll touch on this later, there are so many tools in 2020 that can enable you to measure results and help outline if you're able to achieve those objectives. So once you have a situation and you have a clear goal and clear objectives, I think it's really important to dive into your audience. And I think this is something that I really don't know if I appreciated really even early in my career, much let alone whenever I was in school. But you need to understand who your target audience is. That's the first step. And I think this audience section, for me, I kind of consider, consumer insights, if you will. So understanding who your target audience is, what are their demos, what are their what are their geos? So like from a demo perspective, what's their age, what's their race, and geos, obviously, where are they located, and how many of them. I think the next piece too is cultural trends that are relevant to your target audience. I think in the day and age of social media, we're seeing that people are doing different things and experiencing different things, and really tapped into certain networks. It's really important to know what is important, and what people are really interested within your target audience. The next big thing from an audience perspective, and I think that this should totally dictate the how you're communicating throughout your plan, is really outlining how your target audience gets their news, right? So particularly these younger generations, they're not reading hard copy newspapers anymore, and they're not going and picking up print magazines. They're getting a lot of their information on social media. You need to figure out where are people getting their news, and if it's social media, what platforms, and are there any functions within that platform that are particularly powerful. That's really, really important, particularly in public relations, right? We're communicators. Money is really important. I think it's really interesting to understand, how does your target audience spend their money? What is it going to? What are they really focusing their resources on? And then also, how do they spend their spare time? What are their hobbies? What do they like to do when they're not taking classes or studying or doing work? And then I think the last thing is, what do they care about? Are there any special causes? Is there anything that your generation, your target audience, is really tapped into? And is there any way that your PR plan can leverage that? So again, I think that this is a really, really important piece. And I think that this should then ladder back to the rest of your plan. You should take this into consideration, and it should help shape the creative of how you plan to execute. A few years ago, I was a kind of central figure for a campaign. And to put it candidly, the campaign was a total flop. It was true shit. And I remember taking a step back and just thinking, wow, we're pouring so much money into this, and we're putting so much time into this. Why is this not resonating? And I truly think the reason that it didn't resonate is, when we were pulling together the plan, we really kind of tapped into a consumer insight that I felt like was kind of fudged or forced, and wasn't necessarily accurate of how our target consumer was really feeling. I think that I don't think that we did that insight justice, and I think we manipulated it to kind of lock in a creative idea. And because of that, people didn't care about our campaign, and people didn't engage with our campaign. Media wasn't interested in our campaign, and we got a lot of negative pushback from it. So I always look to that one meeting when I remember thinking to myself, I don't know if that consumer insight is really fair or true. And the client bought in, and we ended up executing a campaign that really fell flat. So this is very important. The next piece, and I think other than objectives and goals, I think the biggest kind of tricky thing within a PR plan is identifying strategies versus tactics. And it was really hard for me whenever I was pulling together these slides. What's the best way for us to define that? And I found this quote somewhere on Twitter that said, strategies describe the destination and how you are going to get there, and tactics describe the specific actions you are going to take along the way. And that helped me, and I felt like that was clear. So I'm kind of breaking it down on this next slide to really chat through kind of what is different, and how what's different between strategies and tactics, and what makes a really strong strategy and a really strong tactic. So strategies connect to the core intention of the campaign, outlines a clear path to desired end result, reflective of your consumer insights. That ties back to what I just talked about with that audience piece. And then tactics support your strategies, right? So they clearly aid in the strategy. They help convey campaign key messages. They're timely, they're within budget, and they help drive results. So I think an example to help you kind of nail this down for me, a strategy would be, X brand taps into the target audience's love of country music and activates within the space to deliver the key campaign messages and raise money for charity, right? So let's say we're looking to reach recent college grads in the heartland, right? And after doing our consumer research, we know that this group of individuals love country music. And we think that we can leverage country music throughout our campaign to help deliver our key message and let's say raise money for charity. Let's say that is one of our objectives, right? That is the overall strategy. We know that our consumer loves country music, so we're going to leverage that throughout our campaign to help reach those objectives. One of the tactics would then be we host a benefit concert with X country singer where all the proceeds go to the campaign's charity. So again, hosting that concert ladders back to the strategy of working within country music to help deliver our message. I hope that's clear, and if it's not, I'm sorry. Next piece is timelines. So this is weird. I think when you are in school, I think people completely tell you that you need to be really tight on timelines and you have to go XY thing or XYZ and you can't miss anything and you have to be organized. And that is all true. But I think the overall theme, and I can talk about some of the four kind of points I outlined, I think the overall theme needs to be that you need to be one, organized, but you also need to be nimble. I think timelines are things that always flex, they always move forward and backwards, and you need to be ready to adjust accordingly. But taking it from the top, I think timelines are important because not only does it hold you accountable, but it also holds your external parties accountable. Whether it's your teacher giving you approval or a grade or a client, making sure your budget is good to go and they've reviewed everything. You need to set a timetable so everybody is on the same page and understand what needs to be done and by when. When you're pulling together a timeline, always give yourself some wiggle room. Always. You always want to pad that timeline so you're not panicked if something comes up, which leads me to the next thing that I think is always important to embrace. You need to expect fire drills. And when they come, you can't panic. Everybody takes their cues from you. If something comes out of nowhere and you have to shift and adjust, then you have to do that. But remain calm and just be prepared and be organized. And then the last piece, and this kind of ladders back to what I was just saying, you need to be nimble and prepare to move faster or slower if need be. I think it's really important to be both organized and strict with your timeline, but understand if it needs to flex a little bit. The next section is budget. Maybe not as relevant for a campaigns class, but it's certainly relevant within your professional career. One tip that I got, and this is kind of outside of the 8 elements of a PR plan, I'll never forget one of our alums asked me or told me to take an accounting class my last year. And I bailed on it because I didn't really want to work hard. And I was like, I'm not an accounting major. It doesn't make sense. I should have listened to it because it doesn't matter what sector of PR you enter, you're definitely going to have to deal with numbers. You're going to have to crunch numbers. You're going to have to understand numbers. And having some sort of at least top line accounting class can be really helpful, especially when you're putting together budgets. So budgets need to be comprehensive, they need to be clear, and they need to be organized. I have one client who's a total stickler about our budgets. She needs it to be clear. She needs to understand exactly what is being covered. She needs, the really obnoxious tabs and color codings. It is very important, and nobody wants to mess around with money. So it's important that you're really buttoned up. Similar to your timelines, you need to pad your budget, expect overages, expect that you're going to have some sort of late fees or someone's going to come in higher or lower. It's really important to give yourself some wiggle room. You don't want to spare yourself and then really have to sacrifice things at the end of the day. I'm a big fan from a budget perspective. You should really collaborate with whether it's your classmates, whether it's your colleagues, to ensure that all of your out-of-pocket fees and all of your fee figures, if you guys are charging fee, are accurate and the budget isn't missing any important line items, it's very hard to then build that back in. The last piece that I think is interesting, and this can get a little clunky, so bear with me here, but sometimes I think it's really, whenever you're pulling together a PR plan, it's important to outline some options, right? So maybe you present this big idea that they really like, but you know it's maybe outside of the budget that you've initially been given. Outline what that's going to be, and then maybe outline to them, if you want to go in budget, this is what it's going to cost, but you're going to remove X, Y, and Z elements that you really liked. I think sometimes that's helpful so they can see, okay, it'll cost me X more if I want all of these really nice plus ups and extensions. And I think that's helpful to a lot of clients. Excuse me. And the last piece, which is so important, is you need to communicate immediately with clients or teachers when you expect overages. I think a lot of people will come to clients at the last minute when decisions have been made and say, hey, I need XYZ dollars to support this activation, and I need your approval in 2 hours. It's a messy way of working. It's not a good look, and it puts a lot of people in tricky situations. As soon as you anticipate or have a feeling that you could be over on budget or having some budget shifts or need to move money around, you have to communicate that with your internal team and your external team immediately. This next slide just makes me laugh every time I see it, particularly with my clients. I think I sent it to them once when they were really driving me nuts. But a lot of clients want the world and they expect that you can give them the world, but their budget does not indicate that. And I think making sure that you really outline to them how much things are going to cost and bring them down to reality is really important. This last and final element of a PR plan, I believe, is the most important, and this is measurement. And I don't think that it gets enough attention, whether you're in school or when you're working. Measurement is so important, and that's my first kind of like insight nugget, bullet, whatever the hell we want to call this, is that your KPIs or your results, those are king or queen to your work. This is how you showcase the results of PR and the worth of PR. So you need to make sure that you're taking this seriously. You need to make sure that you're tracking your results throughout the campaign. And this also helps identify how you did against those objectives. It's crucial for the team to track results throughout a campaign to ensure accurate reporting. I think a lot of times you get done with a campaign and you have to pull together a recap, or you have to put together your campaign book and you're like, oh shit, I wasn't paying attention and didn't track media placements or attendance or whatever your metric is. You have to have the mindset to always be monitoring results immediately and accurately, which leads me to my next insight and point, is that results need to be clear and tracked, and you need to have evidence. There are certain clients that are going to grill you. They're going to want to see your clips. They're going to want to see RSVP sheets. They're going to want to see everything because they need to show proof. And it's very important to be organized and have all of that. The good thing about 2020 is that there's an opportunity to think outside of the box and report new and unique metrics that can impact your objectives and your goals, and I think also showcase the worth of PR. So a few years ago, it was really how many placements did you get, how many impressions you get, how many people showed up to your party. Those were like the big kind of metrics for PR. But I think that we can do so much now with our resources. So if you're measuring a placement, you can take a deep dive into percentage of branded visuals and message pull through. You can also take a look at that media outlet and then pull some of their demographics. So who are we reaching? What's the influence of this outlet instead of just a round kind of ambiguous impression number? Obviously, social content has really changed the game from an earned perspective, and a lot of the agencies are pointing to earned social wins as almost more important and more relevant as print pieces, right? So you can really dive into the impressions and the engagement rates that content is receiving and how maybe that compares to the social catalog of whether it's a news outlet or an influencer. There are more and more resources that are coming forward. I think it's really important to dive into them, make sure that you know what you're measuring, and also make a case as to why that's really important. I think the last piece that's really important whenever you're doing measurement, and this for me is more kind of on the recapping side. I don't know if this is totally relevant for measurement, but it's really important to track campaign photos, make sure you include visual identities, POS. The look and feel of a campaign is so important. And that's something that's very easy to digest as a client or as a teacher. Did something look good? Was something on brand? Did something feel clean? So make sure that you have all of those design elements, photos. If there's great attendance, that's another great way to showcase the power of a campaign is to really include those visuals that make it come to life. So never forget about that whenever you're pulling together your PR plan and showcasing that. I hope that this was very helpful. This is just kind of some top line thoughts whenever you're pulling together your PR plan. You can definitely reach out if you have any questions or concerns. I hope that this is relevant to students and also people even outside of the agency field.